I like when I'm explaining kind of lightning to people that aren't super technical or like don't really know a lot about maybe how Bitcoin works. I think one thing that I find really interesting about lightning and that I think is useful for maybe understanding what's going on there is one thing that's cool to remember is lightning kind of came out of this idea that transacting on the blockchain, so the layer one, is kind of like the court of law, and that you can have contracts and relationships and economic relationships with other people where you only have to go to the court of law or the layer one in the case of a dispute or a problem, or where the other party in your contract stops responding, right? So the idea with like lightning is that people can transact peer-to-peer transactions. They can exchange Bitcoin in a trustless way without having to talk to the blockchain, except in case of there being a problem. So it's like you and your friends can make a contract. You have a lawyer draw up a standardized contract. You guys can make a contract, and you and your friend can do business with this contract, and be successful at conducting business between the two of you. And most times there won't be problems, right? Most of the time, you and your friend will agree on what you've agreed on, and you'll like trust that the contract is correct. And most of the time, you don't end up in a court of law, right? So one way of thinking about Lightning is the spec developers like myself, or like the lawyers. We write up the rules and the contracts. And then the Lightning implementations kind of use these contracts to talk to each other. So whenever they create a Lightning like channel, so to speak, that's really like opening up a contract in a shared joint banking account, so to speak, between two people. And then they can use basically Bitcoin contracts, Bitcoin transactions that they don't share with anyone else. They just keep them between the two of them to update what their balance is. Like, so they update how much they owe each other, whatever. And every time you change the contract in Lightning, so Lightning is kind of like a Bitcoin transaction that you don't spend, you just hold on to it, and you can spend it in the future. But what you take whatever that transaction says, that like we'll have like let's say I have a Bitcoin and you have a Bitcoin in the channel, we'll have a signed contract, and both of us have to produce a signature to make that contract valid. So every time we change the balance, we just write a new contract and we both sign, we just produce signatures for the new version of the contract. And then the most up-to-date version of the contract will have both of our signatures, which in terms of like, when you go to a court of law, you're like, here's the contract, we both signed it, right? You can take that. In this case, it's not actually a contract, it's actually a Bitcoin transaction, which are sort of like forms, and you need signatures to make them actually valid on chain. You can take that signed Bitcoin transaction to the blockchain, which is the court in this case, and have them figure out, okay, is this a valid transaction, etc. So that's why Lightning works so well and so fast, is because in order for two people to agree that their balance has changed in Lightning, all you need to do is get two new signatures, right? And with like modern communication technology, that's really fast. That's as fast as your network can work, right? And how fast your database can save it to disk. Like, so how fast can Lightning payments be is like how fast is your network connection and how fast is your hardware where you're saving the new signatures, right? Because you don't want to count it as saved until you've saved it to disk, right? Like that makes sense. So Lightning is a lot faster than on-chain, because in on-chain you have to wait for a miner to take that transaction that you've made with the form and include it in a block that they're making. And there's a lot of other people that want to do it. So you're like kind of competing with whoever else wants to transact at the same time. And it's this big global, everyone in the world using Bitcoin is all competing for the miner's attention, for the miner to add that transaction. Whereas in Lightning, you already have, so there's setup costs, because setting up all these contracts to be able to do Lightning payments takes time, right? That takes a transaction on chain to set up that contract. But once you have all these contracts established, and if you have the contracts established in the right places, then you can get a bunch of people transacting really quickly with Bitcoin without ever having to talk to the layer one or go to court, right?